Hi people, me again of course, Moino Ravenberg as always, Andrew as usual. Yeah, I'm going to be discussing, as you can tell based on the header, as always, Andrew as usual, the specifically getting out of prison in a manner of speaking, how to deal in an occult way or manner with incarcerations or institutionalizations of any kind, essentially being held against your will. So just plain and simply put, being incarcerated, being locked up, if you will. Now, as is usually the case, I have an article associated with this video. This video will be embedded in the article and you can find it by default linked in the description of this video. Now, I'm briefly going to be reading over and glossing over my own article, and then I'll make any addendums and any other statements that are necessary. Freedom from incarceration through the seventh Pentacle of the Sun. There aren't too many methods in the occult for dealing with being locked up to the point where one gains his freedom back, so to speak. Here I'll cover one of the most effective methods of doing so, or for doing so. Yeah, and then it's the seventh Pentacle of the Sun, taken from the Greater Key of Solomon. If any be by chance imprisoned or detained in fetters of iron, at the presence of this pentacle, which should be engraved in gold on the day and hour of the sun, he will be immediately delivered and set at liberty. And then you've got editorial notes. On the arms of the cross are written the names of Shashan, angel of air, Arel, angel of fire, Forlak, angel of earth, and Taliahat, angel of water. Between the four arms of the cross are written the names of the four rulers of the elements, Ariel, Seraph, Tarsis, and Cherub. The versicle is from Psalm CXVI 16:17. Thou hast broken my bonds in sunder. I will offer unto thee the sacrifice of thanksgiving, and will call upon the name of Yod-Heh-Vaveh. Of course, a thingy for God, the divine name for God, or a reference to God. And then I continue my article. The above pentacle taken from the Greater Key of Solomon is perfect for the aforementioned task. I'll explain how it works in general / overall. Let's say you've got someone that's detained or incarcerated or unjustly has been wronged in some way, shape, or form. For example, the guy's been sentenced 10 years longer than he was supposed to. The act was committed in self-defense, or the judicial system presiding over his case was not of a just nature, wink, wink. You guys know what I mean. And so on. What the Pentacle will do is put everything in motion in such a manner that the person is freed, so their case will be appealed / re-reviewed, and the right people will be involved and take appropriate action to such an extent that him being released ASAP will be the outcome, being acquitted of all charges and whatnot. Things to keep in mind is that this type of venture, to avoid any confusion, to avoid any confusions and misunderstandings, is not for people that are genuinely guilty and need to karmically pay the price for their misdeeds, etc., or for cases where another factor or element is dominant, e.g. finance or family-related matters. In such a situation, the principle of who is in the right / wrong applies, and how much of the case is judicial in nature, etc. For the rest, you're good to go. Yeah, now, for as is usually the case, it's pretty much self-explanatory. I have, other than this pentacle, I don't think I've ever come across a situation or any kind of occult technique, or specifically a spirit that deals with what this pentacle does, which is essentially free people from prison or any kind of involuntary detainment, people being held against their will, you name it. Now, so yeah, how this pentacle works, because I've looked into this pentacle, and of course it's quite powerful. All the pentacles are, but again, within its own right, it is quite powerful, and it works exactly as I described. For example, you're in prison. It was self-defense, and for whatever reason the judge didn't like your face or whatever, and you get sentenced to 50 years in prison for a guy that came at you with a knife, and you simply ended up killing the guy in self-defense. You stabbed the guy with his own knife. You took the knife from him, you managed to wrestle the knife away from him, and you stabbed him in the eye, and boom, guy is dead. You know, and you get put on trial for second-degree murder or whatever, despite the fact that it's being purely self-defense, regardless of the reason. Okay, that's what this pentacle is for, essentially. You were unjustly incarcerated, you know, at best for something like that you can do community service or something like that, but you know, I'm not claiming to be an expert on the judicial system, but from a moralistic perspective, You didn't do anything wrong, especially if you don't have any priors. I mean, if someone had like a criminal record and something like that happens, I can say from a neutral perspective, hey, it seems to be too much of a coincidence. It seems like the guy keeps getting into trouble. You would think that someone with his rap sheet would do anything to avoid the aforementioned. Instead, the guy he seems to keep getting out of trouble. So I would be more inclined to offer some kind of prison sentence, but not 50 years or anything like that. After, of course, having reviewed the case thoroughly in detail. But someone that has nothing, squeaky clean person is a normal person, and the person simply did what any person would do. Then, no, someone like that, that's what this Pentacle is essentially for. That's a case in which you were legitimately wronged. Not someone that deserves to be incarcerated because they legitimately did something wrong. No, obviously the Pentacle won't help you because you deserve to be there, honestly. Of course, it's not a black and white issue, but generally speaking, that's the gist of things. And let me see, what else was I going to say? Yeah, so that's what this Pentacle is for, and how this Pentacle works is, like I said, all the factors that need to be put in place will be put in place. Similar to how magic overall works, honestly, by default, but in quite a potent manner, as in the people involved the people that need to be involved in order for you to gain your freedom as soon as possible, preferably immediately, will be drawn in by the Pentacle, whether it's the media, the press, a specific lawyer that has the specific skill set and all the other traits needed to do his or her thing to the point where you get freed, the judge, every party involved, okay, all the correct paperwork, all of that stuff. The Pentacle will draw all of that in to the point where you get freed, or at the very least you get a reduced sentence, etc. You name it, okay, as in the best possible outcome under given conditions and or circumstances, as is the case by default, will be given to you. And of course, it's obviously better than nothing. I mean, a year or two even would be better than 50 years. And like I mentioned, this Pentacle is not, for example, for a situation where it's like a family court or it's a small claims court where you're supposed to pay someone something back and it just goes on. I mean, it's impractical to apply this Pentacle to such a situation and or a case. You need to use common sense and logic and thereby, as a practitioner, and thereby make an assessment. Doesn't matter whether you're doing it for yourself or if you're doing it on someone else's behalf, like you have a family member or another loved one or a friend that's imprisoned or incarcerated in the aforementioned way, shape, and or form. You need to simply use logic, just think about everything, evaluate everything, and then you can decide. But for example, in the case of a small claims court where money was the issue, then it's pretty much straightforward, honestly. You're either in the right or you're in the wrong. I mean, it's a small claims matter, so it doesn't really mean that, hey, okay, you owed someone $3,000 and it turns out that the person that you're of the argument that the person isn't entitled to their money back because you already, for example, spent money on something that they already reclaimed, like a lawnmower, you name it. I mean, it's quite straightforward, honestly. The judge will make a decision like right there and then. A case like that usually takes what? Definitely less than a day, obviously, like in a half an hour. Something like that is something that, honestly, any neutral person with a good head on their shoulders can actually be the judge in that situation and issue a verdict. So yeah, the Pentacle is obviously impractical to apply it within that context. You could still apply it, but it's quite impractical. The equivalent to using a sledgehammer to break an egg. It's just impractical in one word. And for family related issues, again, you need to use logic and reason. If, for example, you were married and your ex-wife wants sole custody of the children, but you also want to see your children and she wants to utterly alienate your kids from you, despite the fact that you didn't do anything wrong and you're within your rights to at least have shared custody, and it can turn into a long drawn out case for complicated reasons, then yeah, you can apply this. But again, you need to understand the basic premise, how the Pentacle works based on intent. Your intent is that you're being in the wrong. Is that you're being wronged here. You moralistically deserve access to your children. And you have the opposing party, which literally wants to completely take all of that away from you for no reason, as in you're in the right, she's in the wrong moralistically, he or she is in the wrong, then yeah, using this pentacle is valid. But like I said, you need to use common sense, logic, reason, etc., etc., etc. But even then, you see for yourself that it's quite different from the conventional case. It's not a serious, heavy-handed court case. It has a heavy family-related tint to it, and the Pentacle will apply its power or apply its intent, but it's not going to, for example, cover the entire case in full, depending on the situation. That's because it's, like I said, with the aspect where family comes into play, it's not going to cover that. It can cover that, but it doesn't have that as a specialty. So again, for the last time, you need to use like logic and reason. It's like measuring, engaging, and whatnot. You always have other options at your disposal, such as working with the spirit, if you're a practitioner, or something else, honestly. Again, don't get me wrong, you can still use a pentacle in such a situation, a family-related situation of a heavy-handed nature. My point is simply with these examples, like I already said, is that you need to measure and gauge the situation, and then you can make a decision as in, this is what the pentacle does, and this is my situation, a judicial situation that I'm involved in. Is the pentacle the best option or the most practical, a practical option outright, plain practical option based on all the factors involved, based on my case, whether I'm in the right or wrong moralistically, the severity and the magnitude of the case, the duration of the case, the anticipated duration, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. I'll hear it if there are any other questions. Bye bye.